Hey, Stone Ridge Connect. Welcome to Scaling Copilot across M365. I'm here with my friend Tyler, and we are going to jump in. So first of all, just if you haven't met me, I'm Tracy Ottenstreyer. I'm a lead consultant here for Copilot M365. I've been Copilot obsessed for 3 years. Think back to the February 2023 Bing Chat days. I've been with Stone Ridge just over 4 years now, and I've been in the industries working in technology for over 30. So I spend most of my time helping teams move from AI curiosity, if you will, to real usable solutions. So I'm really excited to talk about how we can make that happen with you today.
Thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Allard. I am a solutions architect and a team manager of the cloud services team here at Stone Ridge Software. For the last 3 years, I've been enjoying the pleasure of working with Tracy specifically on our Copilot team, focusing on adoption and governance frameworks. For the last 8 years, I've been a cloud consultant focusing on modern work and remote work, and I have 10 years of technical experience for delivery in modern work, security, and governance in the Microsoft space, both on-prem and in the cloud.
Fantastic. Tyler, you are a delight to work with. So let's dive right in. Why is scaling harder than just starting with AI? Okay, most organizations start strong. There's a lot of curiosity around AI right now. Executives know that it matters. We see maybe some early wins, and we just know that it's something we need to focus on. But once people get more access, things tend to get uneven fast. Usage becomes inconsistent, leaders need a plan, governance questions show up, and proof of value matters and seems hard to measure. So the stall usually happens when scale is driven by the number of licensed users actually, instead of workflow or role-specific training. Clear ownership matters. And let me tell you what scaling is not and what scaling really is. So scaling is not just giving people licenses. It's not just running demos and doing one-time training, assuming people are going to use their licenses and actually know how to just do AI. Adoption works when there's clarity. So real scale happens when Copilot becomes part of someone's everyday work, and that requires intentional adoption, connecting to actual workflows and guided expansion with governance practices. What I say at the bottom of this slide is that real scale means Copilot is becoming part of everyday work in a way that is useful, governed, and sustainable.
The foundations for successful Copilot scaling that we've learned as we've worked through this both internally and with our clients falls into 3 main buckets. The first of one being the Champions program, which Tracy will tell you about in a little minute, but that's really fostering the current excitement for AI and leveraging that into a machine that will sustain itself as you try to keep that adoption going forward. But while that's happening, we want to have insight into what is happening in your environment. What data is Copilot using? What are you looking at? How are people using Copilot? How do we make data-driven decisions around the value proposition of Copilot? And then once we have that level of insight, we know what's happening, then we measure that against our governance policies. We need to know if we need to make any changes. We can understand the tools that are available in M365 to lock things down, or perhaps even make things more available to Copilot so we can get that business value out of it.
That's right. So let's start by talking about that Champions program. First of all, I want to point out, I picked this slide with the people working in a garage on purpose. So if you think about businesses that started in a garage, some of them got really good, right? And I think it's because that principle of a small team working together and pushing the limits, if you will, of what can be done and what's possible can be really effective. So maybe it's in a garage, maybe it's in a set of, areas in your offices, or maybe it's virtual. But cohorted based learning focused on peer interaction, when you have live demos, hands-on problem solving, diverse cross-functional people working together from IT to marketing to operations to HR to programming, right? all of that really makes a difference. So it can reinforce the fundamentals of what you're learning, and it can help cultivate those daily habits. So when you translate this cohorted learning into AI, it's that plan that progresses from foundational to advanced skills, and it's reinforcing of habits that really make a difference. Now, the champions approach drives Copilot specifically because it helps me maintain momentum by encouraging that ongoing engagement for people. Champions help stay informed of new features. Some might be excited or see something new and share it with others. And it ensures that the team benefits from that latest information. Also, that shared knowledge and use cases across departments builds a really collaborative culture. And we see this with our clients all the time. It fosters wider adoption and maximizes Copilot's value throughout the organization. In fact, this is a slide we put together specific to Microsoft stats. So the third-party research shows that when a company simply assigns Copilot licenses, typically only about 1/3 of users become consistent users. But when organizations invest in these champion programs, these cohorted programs, and have power user enablement, adoption becomes 2 to 3 times higher in their organizations. And the proficiency that users have of the tool, AI and Copilot, is 40% faster. So really, when you think about it, Copilot adoption is a change management problem. It's not just giving people a license problem. So this is a slide I really like because it talks about real stories. These are real outcomes from clients that we've worked with doing real work. In 2 cases that I can recall off the top of my head, agents were already projected to save hundreds of hours a year. And that's a repeatable story that I'm seeing. So we show people, how to build an agent, and that's the kind of results that we're seeing. Another example showed that even a small champion group can spark broad change. One organization turned a week-long manual task into about an hour's work. This is the point. When people are equipped and supported and given permission, really, to rethink what work should look like, Copilot and those AI tools stop becoming just things to try, and they start becoming part of how we actually operate. Tyler, do you want to talk a little bit now about Copilot monitoring and how we can really manage AI in our systems?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tracy. The numbers that you shared are really impressive, and I'm glad that we were able to share them with you. That we are able to share them with you is through insights and analytics through the built-in tools available with your M365 Copilot license. The 3 big players in that space are going to be the M365 Admin Center. How is Copilot? Is it enabled? Is it being used? The Copilot control system, which gets a little bit more in depth. How is it configured? How specifically is it consumed? And importantly, how is it governed at present? And then as you work through your scaling journey and you get up to an amount of about 50 users, that's really where the Copilot Dashboard analytics powered by Viva Insights really starts providing the most value. The M365 Admin Center answers, is Copilot enabled? Is it being used? The control system is more about, is it governed? Is it configured appropriately in our environment for scale? And then that Viva Insights perspective is really, how is it delivering impact in our organization? What I'd like to do now is jump into a quick demo into these admin centers so you can get a little bit more of a comprehensive view of what that looks like in practice. Jumping over now, we have the M365 admin center. Tracy, give me a shout when you can see that.
Sure can.
Perfect. So the M365 Admin Center might look familiar because it's a tool that you can measure for adoption with all M365 apps, not just Copilot. But you can see here in the reporting that Copilot has its entire own blade. If we get into that, we can see that it's broken down by Copilot, Copilot Chat, agents, and of course, expenses. If we go into Copilot, we'll see that it gives us a little bit of insight in our demo tenant here on how many enabled users there are and how many active users. The core message that I want to share with you for this view of Insight is that it's binary. We can see if users have it or they don't. We can see if they're active or they're not. We can see if they're using an app or they're not. That is essentially it. And the same goes for the other Copilot stacks. If we jump into agents, for example, see in our demo tenant, as it loads, there are agents available, not currently being used within the time limit for this report. But if we notice in this recommendations blade, it tells us, included in our M365 licensing, if we want to understand how Copilot is being used better, that's where we can jump into the Copilot control system, which I have here. So this is also in the M365 Admin Center, but you can see Copilot and agents have their own separate blade. And within the Copilot control system, here's where we get a little bit more bespoke information on which Copilot licenses are the ones that are available. And we have built-in security and health metrics. So from a governance perspective, this is going to measure the tools that are available based on your licensing and your tenant. Default protections, are they in place? Are they not? Is there any action required? As I'm talking, you can see that it's working on building its recommendations because they are bespoke recommendations for your tenant, not just boilerplate things that you may have already configured or choose to bypass. If we scroll down while that's loading to managing data oversharing, how do we make sure that the data hosted in the cloud is locked down and not being shared? These are things that you need to have in place before you start really pushing out wide scale adoption in your tenant. And then if there are things that it recommends, like we can see our data leaks policies and monitoring only, if we need to start enforcing that before we're going to roll out the licensing to everyone, we can click this manage policy link, and that's going to take us straight to the admin center where we can perform these actions. These are live dashboards. Changes in your environment should be reflected almost immediately. Now, if we have everything in place and we're looking to really drive adoption, the most powerful tool available for monitoring Copilot adoption and getting that extra level of business insights is the M365 Viva Insights platform, which can provide you with Copilot Dashboard analytics. So let me jump into sharing that presentation now. So jumping right back into it, again, Copilot Dashboard analytics powered by Viva Insights. This is for behavioral adoption and business impact analysis. If you look at this screenshot, we're getting a lot of the same information right off the bat that's available in the M365 versions of the Admin Center. So if we have access to this, we can leverage this and get most of that information, but it really takes it one step further. Here's an example of adoption by group and how it's being measured. Now before, like I said, that Copilot Admin Center or the reporting within the M365 Admin Center, it's binary. Is someone using it or are they not? Here, we can break down users by group rather than just everybody. So we can see business units, who's adopting it, who isn't. We can measure that trend over time. We can choose how we want that data displayed, and we can have those groups measured against the rest of the organization, and perhaps more importantly, against other organizations in your field. You can see that in this example, the client is the top 10% of companies like yours. This is, again, available in your M365 licensing, and no additional configuration is required. These are by default analytics that are available in the Viva Insights platform. The utilization of them and their availability is, however, dependent on you having a user count of at least 50 users so that you can actually break it down into different groups and start getting value out of this tool. Another example is usage intensity. What this allows us to do as we scale is track habit information over time. You can see frequency drop, perhaps on the left chart here, but you can also see consistent usage go up or remain stable. That's what we tend to see in some of our client environments, and what that really means is that The frequency of the usage is dropping, but the consistent usage is there because they've gotten really efficient in how to use Copilot. They're not going into the platform, or they're not having to use 10 chats to get the result. They have their prompt save, they just paste it in there, and then bam, they're done. The work is already done. They don't need to spend the time figuring it out anymore. And again, on the bottom side, that we can now create groups and measure adoption by group. And that's because when we look at this all user metrics, it's not telling the whole picture. In the clients that we've worked with, obviously people in the manufacturing or operations floor aren't going to be using Copilot as much because they're working with their hands, but people in HR, finance that are finding ways to leverage the data that is in M365, they do have higher adoption. So let's try to get the information and understand where that usage is. Again, it takes that binary metric, used versus not used, into a behavioral signal. Is it embedded into the workflow? Are we actually fostering adoption to allow scale, or is it superficial use? And then again, a deeper level of insight before we could see adoption by application, but now we can break it down by job function. We can show benchmarks against other competitors in the space. It breaks out the applications for us, and it's a percentage of active Copilot users, not against all users. What this allows us to do is enable targeted enablement strategies as we try to scale Copilot moving forward. What we found in our engagements is that there are a lot of early adopters, and what we can tell with these applications is where we need to focus potential training opportunities as we scale up. Using Copilot Outlook can be pretty free, summarize an email, but things like PowerPoint and Excel can be a little bit challenging, but that's where we want to focus our energy on teaching people how to use these tools so that adoption can go up.
Yeah, this is fantastic stuff. I love how you show how real-time telemetry and usage of these dashboards is a way to really monitor and support adoption in the company. And when we review those usage patterns over time, the trend is really meaningful as well. So you're really able to see and grasp what's going on. We know that people are really trying to get that ROI measurement out of the system, and this is like a real concrete way to do that. So if you would change to the next slide, I think we're going to start now going into some more governance and meaningful measurement, or beyond the measurement, and really understanding how to stay safe as we scale within Copilot.
That's right, Tracy. When we start understanding what people are doing in our environment, we'll also understand, are the governance tools that we have in place actually actioning what we need them to? The four main tools that we leverage in a Microsoft environment are Microsoft Entra ID, Microsoft Intune, Microsoft Purview Information Protection, and Microsoft Defender for cloud apps. These are the recommend tools from Microsoft, and they provide a holistic approach to security, compliance, and privacy in line with your governance policy to make sure that you have the confidence to fully adopt Copilot in your environment without any additional friction or additional barriers. So what does this look like in practice? The first two tools we have are Intune and Entra, and that's how we can manage risky users, privileged users, potentially overprivileged users. We have tools in the software suite to delineate permissions based on location, business unit. We can completely segment admin permissions, right? If someone's going to be putting a prompt or working with Copilot, we might want them to use their permissions as a normal user, not an elevated user, and add a whole bunch of extra data into that prompt. And then, of course, we have Microsoft Intune, which is going to measure the compliance of the devices that they're using Copilot on, and perhaps even not let them use it if they're at a hotel kiosk, for example. And all of those flags are then forced through the M365 applications. They're all at base level, if you're using the M365 apps, totally ingrained into the security posture to the point where we can control if people can even copy and paste within these applications. And within these applications is where your team is using M365 Copilot. Now it's Copilot itself that is going to go to your data to try to answer these prompts, and that where Purview comes in. There's levels of purview depending on your licensing, and some of the advantages of it are included in your M365 licensing. But really the high level theory of this is that it is giving you not just the insight into what data Copilot is accessing, but you're putting the guardrails around which data it's allowed to access. And then to lock down this entire security posture end to end is Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. Now, how does this help us scale? 95% of the configurations within all of these different buckets is set or configured in a way to scale with your user count. You can use automated tools like Microsoft Autopilot within Intune that's going to automatically configure devices remotely or in your office, so you know it's set. You just add a user to a device and you're good to go. Microsoft Entra ID has the ability to use privileged identity management or role-based access control to really delineate those admin users so that by default they don't have those permissions, taking away that human factor. The information protection that you're configuring in Purview is applying to your data at rest. So regardless of how many users you're giving Copilot licenses to, that data is still protected. And if you want to add a bunch of extra data, there's ways to automate the labeling of those files as well. And then Defender for Cloud Apps is applied to the applications at their level, whether they're using it on their desktop or online, wherever someone is using that application. If you configure these policies, it will be secure and you will be aware of how secure it is. So the way we've tackled this scaling journey at Copilot is with essentially a 3-phase approach. And we start with a list of 8 controls. And within these controls, there's different levers that we measure and we try to pull, but they're broken down into the categories you see here. And each category has a real mix of like technical and non-technical controls. These controls that we measure, for example, under device assurance, is it a corporate device or is it a personal device? Trust and compliance, is MFA configured? Do we have conditional access? Data integrity, is the data available to Copilot to even be built for a prompt? We measure all these things and we consolidate them, and they roll up into what we call the 4 core pillars for AI adoption.
Yeah, and if I can take over the pillars, think about the technical readiness piece being what we look at in your technical environment. And then culturally, we look at how ready are your people and how accepting are your people in the organization for AI to come. Operationally, that pillar looks at how well are workflows documented, is AI aligned with your goals and defined with your business goals, and then organizationally, how digitally mature is your use of Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint, how defined is your plan for onboarding Copilot, and like how well does your company understand prompting, and are your executives aligned with AI and your Copilot goals, these types of things. So when we look at those controls from the lens of each of those pillars, we start to get a picture for what gate in the journey you are of your AI journey, if you will. Your AI gates are things like foundationally, you might be in gate 1. Like we laugh at the idea that there's such thing as an AI policy. We are not aligned, or we technically don't have our house in order. There's just some foundational things that we know we want to get ready. Or maybe you're in gate 2 and you feel like you have an idea of some of these things that we are talking about today, but there's work to be done, right? And so you're going to put some structure around those things. And then all the way up, you can just continue to mature within all of these areas until you get to the scale. And that's what we're talking about. Like, how can you move through these journeys until you get to the point where you're scaling? And when you're scaling, you're really talking about beyond licensing. How are you making meaningful change at an organizational and at those departmental levels with AI? So to wrap things up, what we want to tell you is this is what your roadmap should look like for AI. Start by launching that champions program. Identify 8 to 12 cross-functional team members and commit to that intentional learning and growing together. Enable admin monitoring of the Copilot dashboard for enablement, tracking those active users, prompt volumes, application use patterns, that kind of thing. And then activate those controls, whether it's purview for sensitivity labels or device policies or conditional access policies. Do those things while your champion group is getting established before that broader rollout. And then when you're ready, you're going to begin to scale and optimize, where you can establish that AI governance board that has cross-functional representation to make sure there's usage policies and you're monitoring your compliance and you're tracking those business outcomes. If you need help with any of this, see your client partner or send Stoneridge an email. We would love to help you. Otherwise, we have to wrap up now, and we appreciate your time, and we're excited that we got to spend this time with you. So thank you.
Thanks all for coming.